So, Kenny Omega and Impact Wrestling, the saga continues because, of course, tonight Kenny Omega is making another appearance on Impact Wrestling on Access TV. This will be the third appearance under the Impact umbrella that the AEW World Champion has made. He made his debut with the promotion last week in that segment with Josh Matthews and Don Callis on his tour bus, his Champions Tour bus. He made an appearance at Final Resolution this past Saturday on the very same tour bus, this time with Don Callis and one half of the Impact World Tag Team Champions, Kyle Anderson, and he'll be making another appearance tonight on Impact Wrestling. Now, as we spoke about yesterday, we do have a bit of an update as to the plans for Kenny Omega in Impact Wrestling going forward, specifically the appearance tonight, because following his appearances last week on Impact and at Final Resolution of the weekend, Kenny Omega, as I mentioned once again, will grace fans with his presence tonight on Impact Wrestling. Now, what will actually happen in this segment is still up to be decided, but Dave Meltzer reported on Wrestling Observer Radio that the segment will be used to set up Kenny Omega's first match in Impact Wrestling. This was the quote that Dave Meltzer said. He said, quote, "So with Omega, did they set up the match? Because they're going to announce on Tuesday a Kenny Omega match." Now, this comes after reports by Dave Meltzer, someone who does have very close ties with AEW President Tony Khan. He reported that the Cleaner, the AEW World Champion, will headline some Impact pay-per-views going forward. Pay-per-views with an S, not just one, but multiple pay-per-views. Now, the Impact Executive Vice President Don Callis is the current manager for Kenny Omega, the AEW World Champion, reflecting real life. But the AEW World Champion is currently on a quest with Don Callis to collect as many titles as possible, and looks like he has his eyes on the Impact World Championship, and that's what this whole video is about, a potential Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann match for both the Impact World Championship and possibly the AEW World Championship as well. Now, this first match, as I mentioned, is reportedly going to be revealed tonight on Impact. I think at this point, it has to be Rich Swann. It has to be Rich Swann. If you go back and look at the promo last week with Josh Matthews, Kenny Omega, and Don Callis on that bus, Kenny Omega purposely went off on a tangent. He spoke about when he was younger, one of his big quests was being an avid comic book collector, but one day he realized he couldn't just get the rarest comic books in the world, so he decided to drop that hobby and give up. But he has a new hobby right now, and that's collecting other world championships from other promotions. Of course, he has a championship right now with AAA. He defended that this past weekend at Triple Mania. At the same time, he was at Final Resolution. Gosh, don't you just love post-production and tape delay? That's how Kenny Omega was able to make that possible. So he's got two championships right now with two separate promotions. He's got the AEW World Championship, and he's got, is it the Mega World Championship with AAA? And looks like he wants to add a third with a third promotion, that being the Impact World Heavyweight Championship. So that means he potentially could be facing Rich Swann in the future. And if we weren't positive that that match was going to happen, it was also heavily teased last week on Impact Wrestling on Access TV too, because right before that main event segment with Kenny Omega, with Don Callis, with Josh Matthews on that tour bus, we had the Impact World Champion, Rich Swann. He was trying to leave the building there in Nashville, Tennessee at Skyway Studios. He was stopped by a security guard and says, "Sorry, the World Champion has blocked off the parking lot." Now, Rich Swann was taken back by this and said, "Look, can you stop and tell Moose he's not the real World Champion? I'm the Impact World Champion. Let me go through." And the security guard stopped him again and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, not Moose. The AEW World Champion Kenny Omega." Then they got a great shot on the face of Rich Swann, who just looked so frustrated, disrespected, disgusted. He did not look happy. Then Josh Matthews walked past, says Josh Matthews, he says, "Your name's on the list." He was allowed outside, and the segment ended with Rich Swann not being happy, kicking some furniture, if you will, as he left the scene. So that said to me at the time, we're getting Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann. That match is happening. Then you have the appearance, you have the promo later on in the evening saying he wants to collect world championships. Then you have the report from Dave Meltzer saying Kenny Omega is going to headline multiple Impact Wrestling events. Then you have the other report by Dave Meltzer saying they're going to announce the match tonight on Impact Wrestling on Access TV, whatever that match will be. To me, it has to be Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann. A lot of the time as a pro wrestling fan, you try and look at what direction are we heading in terms of the story being told on the screen in front of you. And right now, the story being told is that Kenny Omega wants the Impact World Championship. And we spoke about it previously here on the channel, that I felt that one of the biggest match arguably they could do with Kenny Omega in Impact Wrestling right now would be against Rich Swann. Now, people would disagree with me in the sense that oh, is Rich Swann a big enough star to carry that load, if you will, when it comes to Kenny Omega? Possibly not, but at the moment he is the Impact World Champion. The biggest match you can do is the AEW World Champion versus the Impact World Champion, and that looks like it's going to happen. I mean, if it's not, if they announce that Kenny Omega is going to be facing Eddie Edwards or whatever tonight on Access TV, a lot of people will say, well, you hinted at something completely different, and I understand red herrings. Lord knows I know about red herrings. Think back to Aces and Eights this past summer with Impact Wrestling, but at this point, the fact that it's been hinted so much, and even coming off the back of the Kenny Omega appearance at Triple Mania for AAA this past weekend, you just don't do the teasing segment with Rich Swann saying that the real world champion is blocked off the parking lot without something going to happen in the future. Otherwise, why do the tease? You've got Kenny Omega calling himself a collector, and he's collecting all of these championships. A lot of people are saying it's the same as the Austin Aries storyline in Impact Wrestling way back when, and actually it is. But I think that match is happening. And my takeaway from all of that stuff last week is that it wasn't a one-off segment. And man, oh man, did the reports that say that this relationship with AEW and Impact Wrestling, that it was just going to be a one-off, right? I know I've mentioned this 100 times at this point on the channel, but it's worth mentioning because you have to be held accountable when you make these reports and they don't come true. And it was reported, I'll name him, Wrestling Inc., Nick Houseman, he reported, it's just going to be a one-off, Kenny Omega's not going to be appearing on Impact anytime soon after this, it's a favour to Don Callis. Well, this is going to be the third Kenny Omega appearance, and there's going to be more coming when it comes to headlining pay-per-view events for Impact Wrestling. It's way more than a one-off, and they told us that. They told us that from the beginning, and I think the direction they're heading in at this point is that Rich Swann's going to face Kenny Omega, and quite frankly, I think the direction that they're heading in as well is that Kenny Omega is going to be the Impact World Champion. I think a possibility, and I mentioned the storyline previously, was that the Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President Don Callis and Kenny Omega had screwed over AEW. They'd screwed over Tony Khan, the AEW president and founder. They'd screwed him over in the sense that they broke the gentleman's agreement during the match against Jon Moxley. They stole the AEW World Championship. And essentially at this point, they were holding AEW and Tony Khan to ransom by having the AEW World Championship and the AEW World Champion appear most of the time on Impact Wrestling. Don Callis, this carny old school pro wrestler, had screwed over the billionaire naive fan in Tony Khan. And with the Carl Anderson appearance at the weekend with Kenny Omega at Final Resolution, as I mentioned yesterday, this says to me that the direction they could be going in is that you've got essentially the Bullet Club taking over Impact Wrestling and AEW. We know that the Good Brothers are going to face the Young Bucks, and I know this video is about Rich Swann and Kenny Omega, and we'll get back to that in a second, but I think potentially we could have a Kenny Omega and Good Brothers faction representing Impact Wrestling that then goes over to AEW. That's how you have the Good Brothers Young Bucks match facing off in the future. So that's going to be incredibly, incredibly interesting. But going back to what we're talking about here, the Kenny Omega Rich Swann match, it just makes the most sense now. It just makes the most sense now. If you look at the direction that everything's heading in, it makes the most sense. Obviously, a spanner in the works when it comes to that is Moose. Why is Moose a spanner in the works when it comes to that? Because the Rich Swann Moose storyline is something that's had a lot of seeds planted ever since Bound for Glory. Coming out of Bound for Glory, Rich Swann was the new world champion. Moose had just defeated in that match against EC3. And coming out of that, it was very obvious the next big match for the Impact World Championship was going to be Rich Swann versus Moose. Even on the Impact Wrestling episode after Bound for Glory, you had Moose confront Rich Swann backstage when he was celebrating with the Rascals. Since then, Moose has been feuding with Willie Mack. Why? Because they've been priming Moose for that match against Rich Swann, with Willie Mack being Rich Swann's best friend, right? How do you get to the world champion? You get to his best friend first. That's been the point there. And then, this past weekend at Final Resolution, when Rich Swann defeated Chris Bay, what happened after the match? You had Moose come out holding his TNA World Heavyweight Championship, and then he handed the Impact World Championship back to the Impact World Champion. Basically saying what we'd been saying on this channel for months at this point, come Hard to Kill, the Impact World Championship match looked like it was going to be Rich Swann versus Moose. Right now, I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think they're having to reshuffle some things slightly, because I think potentially the plan was to have Rich Swann versus Moose at Hard to Kill, and it looks like all of the story had dictated that we were going to go in that direction. But now, this AEW crossover, this AEW relationship, and the Kenny Omega appearances on Impact Wrestling have kind of got in the way of that. But I think they still want to do the Rich Swann Moose match, because they've put so much time into building it, quite frankly, that it kind of has to happen, and it looks like they're still staying that course. So how do we get there? How do we get there? Now, you could say, well, Kenny Omega could face Rich Swann at Genesis. Genesis is 7 days before Hard to Kill. Genesis is Impact Wrestling's next Impact Plus exclusive event. It's a bit strange that you've got an event 7 days before a big pay-per-view, especially when it comes to Impact Wrestling. WWE kind of did it this past summer with SummerSlam. 7 days later, they had Payback, and people then was kind of saying that's a bit odd. That's WWE, that's $1 billion publicly traded company. People will watch their events regardless of the proximity to each other. They know that. Impact Wrestling is, I suppose, slightly different because they do have quarterly pay-per-views now. They have about 4 a year, right? And they have the Impact Plus events every month on their streaming service. It does seem a bit strange to have Genesis 7 days before. I think the reason now they have Genesis 7 days before is because we're going to have that Rich Swann versus Moose match, but we're going to have it 7 days earlier than originally intended. Because I think originally the plan was to have Rich Swann versus Moose at Hard to Kill in January for the Impact World Championship. But I think now the main event for Hard to Kill in January will be AEW World Champion Kenny Omega facing the Impact World Champion. But who is going to be the Impact World Champion? Well, that is going to be decided 7 days prior at Genesis. So not only will the winner of the Moose versus Rich Swann match at Genesis be the Impact World Champion, but they will also go on then to face Kenny Omega for the Impact World Championship and the AEW World Championship at Hard to Kill. What a massive pay-per-view main event that would be. Not only is it Kenny Omega's first match inside of an Impact Wrestling ring, on top of that, it's for both world championships of two separate promotions. When is the last time that's ever happened? I don't know if it's ever happened. It'd be a massive, massive event, a massive, massive coup for Impact Wrestling, and you'd be expecting the buys and the buzz and the momentum and people talking about it, the social media trends to be off the chart for Hard to Kill in January. It could be something really, really big. So that's what I think is going to happen there. I think we're going to get Rich Swann versus Moose at Genesis. Then 7 days later, we'll get Rich Swann versus Kenny Omega at Hard to Kill for both World Championships. And if I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself here, I will. But I think that match at Hard to Kill, should it happen, and should it be for both World Championships, I think Kenny Omega should win. It absolutely makes the most sense right now. It absolutely makes the most sense right now. On top of, like I've mentioned before, the old tradition in pro wrestling, if an angle is hot, if a storyline is hot, if a pro wrestler is hot and they've got buzz, they've got momentum, you go with it. Regardless of what was planned, you go with it. That's what made the Attitude Era so successful. They didn't have a lot of long-term storytelling, and I know it's a bit hypocritical because on this channel I'm always campaigning and pleading for long-term storytelling in WWE, and that is true, but if something is really hot, if something has a lot of momentum, if something is going well and it's captured the imagination of the audience, and you're getting the ratings like Impact Wrestling we're getting on Tuesday night, if you're getting the buzz across social media that they got on Tuesday night, if you're getting the reaction they're getting on Twitch and on YouTube and on Facebook like they did last Tuesday, you go with it. You go with it. You double down and you keep going. And if you're an Impact Wrestling official right now, and you think about putting the Impact World Championship on Kenny Omega, it's a no-lose situation, really, because Kenny Omega's going to still make appearances for Dynamite, right? That's his bread and butter. That's where he's contracted, and they're not going to have the world champion of AEW not appear most Wednesday nights on their Dynamite program on TNT. That's not going to happen. But if you have Kenny Omega appearing on Dynamite every single Wednesday with nearly 1 million people live viewing, and in DVR and on demand way more than 1 million people, and he's holding the Impact World Championship, that is a walking advertisement for Impact Wrestling on Access TV. Without even saying it, if he's holding both championships, they'll say, what is that title? They'll say that's Impact Wrestling. When can I watch Impact Wrestling? Because Kenny Omega's going to be there. Oh wait, that's on Tuesday nights on Access TV. That's on Twitch on Tuesday nights. They put it on YouTube. They put it on Facebook. He's a walking billboard, essentially, for Impact Wrestling at that point. So for me, it feels inevitable. It feels inevitable. And as I said previously, people might say, well, how can Kenny Omega do both? We know the taping schedule of Impact Wrestling at this point. We know how they tape TV. They tape them in big batches. Now, last time it was a bigger batch than usual. It was like 6 weeks of TV or something like that. Even with that, they were able to splice in all of these Kenny Omega segments. You could film with Kenny Omega and Don Callis for one day, and you can put them in 6-7 weeks worth of TV. So this idea that, oh, maybe he might not have enough time, maybe it's too much of a commitment, it's not really true. You know, Cody Rhodes spoke about his time with Impact Wrestling previously. Cody Rhodes was technically on the Impact Wrestling roster for like 6 months. He was like, I did 2 days. I did 2 days of TV and that was it. And they stretched that out for a really long time as well. That's how the TV taping deal works in Impact Wrestling. So Kenny Omega can absolutely keep up with that schedule. And when you're someone as big as Kenny Omega in terms of Impact Wrestling, he doesn't have to be competing in the ring every single week on Impact. Now, I know people say, well, it's the Brock Lesnar scenario of WWE. You can't just have your world champion or the Goldberg situation. You can't have your world champion not competing. That is true. If this is a short-term storyline and it's only going to go a couple of months and it's going to be the crossover, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. On the WWE side of things, when they do it with Brock Lesnar and Goldberg, they have stars there. They have stars there. They could put the world champion on. Their TV does suffer because of it. Whereas on this Impact side of things, look, there aren't many top of the card baby faces or just top of the card stars in Impact Wrestling right now. And it's Kenny Omega. You saw the buzz that it got. You saw the reaction, the results in terms of the ratings. It feels inevitable. It feels inevitable and it feels like the right thing to do. And as I've mentioned before, Dave Meltzer mentioned this as soon as Kenny Omega won the Impact of the AEW World Championship when he beat Jon Moxley at that Winter is Coming special edition of Dynamite, and Don Callis was revealed as his manager and this Impact AEW relationship was revealed. Dave Meltzer said at the time, it's Nick Bockwinkel and Bobby Heenan. And I know, again, I'm kind of chewing my food, not even twice, like 10 times at this point, but it's important to mention here, this is why it's going to be Rich Swann versus Kenny Omega for both World Championships, I think, going forward, because it was Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel. Now, Bobby Heenan managed Nick Bockwinkel when he was the AWA World Champion, and he managed him to a match against then WWF Champion Bob Backlund. That was in the 70s. Now, the match happened. We didn't have a World Champion change. It was kind of screwy finishes, count out, DQ, something along those lines. But after Dave Meltzer said that, the invisible hand himself, Don Callis, then started tweeting out pictures of Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel, basically confirming what Dave Meltzer had said, which said to me right there at the time, they're going to go for an interpromotional match between both world champions. And that's exactly, I think, the direction that they're going to go in right now. Kenny Omega was a huge rating success for Impact. And I speculated last week when those ratings come out that they need to double down, keep Kenny Omega on the TV screen, and you might be able to keep the ratings up here, or who knows, maybe even go higher. So by having Kenny Omega appear on multiple episodes of Impact, having wrestled multiple matches, and build to an interpromotional match between two world champions, something we really haven't seen done since the 70s, what a massive deal. What a massive deal that would be for Impact Wrestling. So it feels like that's going to happen. It feels like that's inevitable at this point. And I really do hope it happens because it'd be such a massive event with a lot of buzz. And quite frankly, like I said, if I'm Impact Wrestling, I go, sorry, Rich, I know you've just become the world champion at Bound for Glory, but this is an angle that is red hot right now. Give Kenny Omega the Impact World Championship and have him as a walk-in advertisement every single week. But of course, as always, it's just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on potentially seeing Kenny Omega versus Rich Swann for the Impact World Championship and the AEW World Championship? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Get involved with the community here on the channel. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand corner of the screen right now. Or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.